Good morning. My name is Julie Samuel Westman, and I'm so happy that each of you are here with us on the Zoom call, and also those joining us on Facebook Live this morning. For those of you that are new to Kansas City Oasis, we believe that the human experience is better when it's shared, and we're so pleased that you've chosen to share it with us this morning. We're a secular humanist community where we gather around our 5 values, which are people are more important than beliefs, meaning comes from making a difference, reality is known through reason, human hands solve human problems, and be accepting and be accepted. We have an exciting lineup today. So presenting for us today will be our musical guest, John Mueter, our community moment by Jocelyn Rose, and our guest speaker is Athena Zeiter Hale. So without any further ado, let's give a warm hand-waving welcome to John Mueter.
Okay, am I on?
You're on, my friend.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Great to see you all. I am a classical pianist, and I've chosen a program which I hope everyone can enjoy. I'm going to start with a sonata by Domenico Scarlatti, who was an Italian composer who spent most of his life teaching the Queen of Spain. So he lived in Madrid. He was born the same year as Johann Sebastian Bach and George Friedrich Handel. So those of you who are into astrology might find that very interesting. 1685 was a banner year for classical music. So I will play one sonata by Scarlatti, and then I will play 3 movements of a French suite by Johann Sebastian Bach, the suite in G major, and these are suites of dance movements. The movements are an Allemande, which is a German dance, Corrente, which is an Italian dance, and ending with the gigue, or which we know in English as a jig, a very lively, joyful dance.
I'm so sad that I'm the only one that gets to clap, because I know you're gonna have to go back and read the chat, John. Everybody is so excited that you were so gracious to share your gift with us this morning. And I was remiss in your introduction, so I'm sorry. I want to brag a little bit on John here, member of our community. John is retired from 25 years at the UMKC Conservatory and 5 years at KU, where he taught opera and vocal coaching. So we are just so grateful that you were willing to come share with us today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And maybe we can persuade you to do some sort of fundraiser, because people are wanting to give you tips on your wonderful performance. So it's really appreciated, and I'm at a loss for words. And we're really looking forward to your next two performances this morning. So thank you so much. Woo! Whew, okay, I gotta settle down and remember what I'm supposed to be doing. I was too wrapped up in the music. So, so at this point, we'll do a few announcements. And this is a reminder that if you have life events for yourselves or a loved one that you would like us to share on Sunday mornings with our community, please reach out to a board member or one of the MCs, and we can make sure the community kind of knows what's going on with you. Good, bad, indifferent. This is something that you would like us to know and be able to share and celebrate, or send our positive thoughts your way. We how to do that. So I have a few this morning. First of all, I mentioned that it's Taylor Gibson's birthday on the 16th. So happy birthday to them. Now, you may see on Facebook that our very own David Krampus and Amy Marnie are going to have a medical procedure this week, and Amy will be donating kidney to David. And so they will all be on our thoughts going to this. And Amy was asked about cards, sending card letters, and she would rather say tree. But if we must support David and Amy as they recover, she would rather people donate blood with the knowledge that they're helping to save lives by doing so. And then if that's not something that you're able to do, please think about like a Facebook message to David and Amy and share some personal thoughts. And also funny animal memes and pictures are welcome. So please take some time later this week. I believe it's Thursday. Is that right? You could not, if it's Thursday, correct? For this procedure? I think it's Thursday. So thank you, David and Amy, in your thoughts. Also, another sad note, we received word that Mark Dixon's father passed away yesterday. Mark serves with us on the board of Kansas City Oasis and does a lot of our communities. So please keep Mark and his family in your thoughts this week if they're going through this difficult time. And also then perhaps message him so thanks so much for listening to our announcements. And again, a reminder, we're here to share, we're here to lift each other up when times are hard, and celebrate when times are good. So absolutely let us know. Okay. Okay. So next up, we will have a member of our community that will share with us something about her journey. It's Jocelyn Rose. And she gave us some words to describe herself, and that is loving, thoughtful, resilient. It's another one, and fun. So that's important. It's at times like now where we're trying to find the fun in life. And if she had a warning label, it would be that she may spontaneously. Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. You're super duper choppy to a lot of people right now.
Okay.
Your audience, that is.
Okay, I will work on that.
Myself again now. Sorry.
Okay, so we're going to turn it over to we'll turn it over to Jocelyn, and hopefully I can fix my sound. All right. Jocelyn, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yeah. Okay, so I am going to share my screen with you guys. So give me just 1 second here. Okay, so I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about chronic illness. Okay, I have multiple sclerosis and fibromyalgia, and both are what are considered as invisible illnesses, as it's not something that you can easily see. When people see me, they see any other healthy 33-year-old. I included this next picture with just some of my symptoms written in. So this is just sort of a brief bit. I couldn't fit them all in the picture. There's but so it's fatigue, pain, muscle spasms, total loss of muscle control, headaches, complete blindness if I become too hot, severe pain if I become too cold, inability to stand for long periods of time, arthritis, stuttering, memory or recall issues, difficulty focusing due to pain, insomnia, constant pain with breathing, etc. Most of these things nobody can see. And because chronic pain warriors are so good at pretending to be healthy, you often can't see the effects until we cancel plans, fall, move slowly, or have some other issue. For me personally, I'd say what the worst thing is about being chronically ill isn't the pain or the horrific fatigue, it's the isolation. I had never been more deeply, deeply lonely in my life than when I first became ill. My days are very often nearly always spent alone, with the exception of seeing my roommate or my boyfriend. Though now I also have a group of friends that I see from Oasis, and that makes all the difference in the world for me. I wake up, eat, work from home, often in bed due to pain levels, talk to my boyfriend throughout the day, watch TV, or listen to a book on tape, as arthritis often makes holding a book and turning its pages difficult. Use the restroom, eat something, and hope I don't become ill from it, watch some more TV, and then sleep. And that is often deeply, deeply lonely. Now, due to COVID-19 and the subsequent quarantine, an enormous amount of healthy people now also understand what isolation feels like and how it affects so many different parts of your life. I'm hoping that after quarantine is over, I'll hear a lot less ableist remarks. And what I mean by ableist remarks are remarks like, gee, I wish I could stay in bed all day and work from home. You're so lucky. This is a photo of that a friend who also has MS sent me shortly after my diagnosis. And I just want to read just a portion of it. So it says, when you first become ill, they'll show you sympathy. They'll send you cards and hope you get well soon. They'll call or text to check in and see how you're doing, and they'll cut you slack. They'll be understanding if you have trouble keeping up. But once your illness becomes a chronic condition, they wonder why you can't get better. They show impatience and frustration. They stop trying to include you in plans. They ask why you aren't trying harder. And they don't get it. They just want you to be able to again so that you're not inconveniencing them. Now, this is something that I've experienced 100% in my life. I do not think it's done maliciously at all, but I think people do get tired of the chronically ill person not getting any better. I will say that it's not difficult being the friend of a chronically ill person, but it can sometimes cost you. It will cost impatience, diligence, and just awareness. So what I wanted to do is put together some slides to help talk about some of the easy things that you can do to be an active friend versus a sometimes friend. So the first is check in regularly and often. Call, text, video chat, come over, watch movies, hang out, etc. It takes less than 35 seconds to send a text often. Just a quick, hey, I'm thinking of you today goes a really, really long way. That may be the only interaction that your chronically ill friend gets that day. This is one of the easiest ways to let your friends know that you care and that they are not alone. If they don't respond or respond right away, that's okay, keep texting. Learn about their illness. I can't tell you how many of my Facebook fibromyalgia friends or MS friends have said that this, above everything else, is how they feel and know that they are loved by the people in their lives. When someone seeks to understand you, no matter who you are or what's going on in your life, it's important, it's huge, and it means so, so much. Do a quick Google search and check out a few links. Seek to understand. A quick note, it's okay to ask your friend, but I'll tell you that for me personally, it's exhausting to be talking about my illness very much at all. it's so helpful when someone just does some research on their own without asking me directly, especially for really long questions. Don't offer advice unless asked. Don't, please. Just don't. I promise you that your warrior friend has heard it all and researched it all, and anyway should always be following his or her doctor's instructions. Your essential oils, herbal remedy, lifestyle, eating change, good attitude, smiling more, trying harder advice is all more corrosive than it is helpful. It may come from a good place, but please, unless you have that illness, don't offer advice. And if you are healed from it, or you started taking a vitamin every day and now you suddenly don't have a chronic illness, please still don't offer any advice. On a personal note, I had just been diagnosed, and at least 3 people told me in that same week, oh yeah, my family member, friend, acquaintance had that, they died. Or, oh yeah, so-and-so has that, they're on bed rest now. Please don't say that. It's pretty soul crushing. And one of the most important things after becoming diagnosed is just stay positive. The next one is manage expectations. Don't expect your chronically ill warrior friend to get better. Just love them. Be okay if they never get better, and don't expect them to be able to do all the things a healthy person can do. Trying harder isn't the answer for your friend. Saying if you really wanted to, you could, or you'd find a way to make it work. It's simply not true, and it's deeply painful to be told that, especially when it's something that they badly want to do. Zoom and video calls are amazing. They're just another easy way to include your friends in an event that they can't come to. Just remember to interact with your phone or laptop, and don't forget that they're there. I didn't know about how amazing Zoom and video calls were until quarantine, actually. It's been incredible. It's really just the little things, friends. If they struggle to walk, or they walk a bit slower, measure your steps in time with theirs. I always notice when friends do this, and it means a whole lot to me. Wait for them to finish their sentence without interrupting or trying to complete their sentence for them, especially if they speak slower. Look for ways to include them. Don't write them off because there isn't an obvious way for them to do something. Help them. Improvise, adapt, and overcome. Get creative. Seriously, this one is so, so important. Maybe leave a happy gift for them, a coloring book, a food they like, a blanket, new water bottle, new socks, or PJs. Surprise your friends by paying a month of a single subscription they have, like Netflix or Audible. Remember that they're paying for medications, doctor visits, tests. Something as small as paying for them to be able to escape for a month into someone else's story is an amazing gift. But above everything, please just remember that your warrior friend wants you, their friend, in their life. Seriously, text, text, text. And one last note, my life has become so much better since I joined Oasis. People like Julie Randolph, Nathan Bailey, Joseph Kraft, Denise Robinson, Julie Wisman, Erin Guerra, Mark Dixon, Jacob Cantrell, and Daryl Ray have made my life infinitely better by their kindness and friendship. And I'm so, so grateful for all of you. And to my fellow warriors out there, I see you, I hear you. You are strong, badass warriors, and you are amazing. Don't give up because it gets better, I promise. And that's it for me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, Jocelyn. I'm going to do a quick, we really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you in person when this is all over and getting all those backlog of hugs, if acceptable to you, once we get to meet you in person. But we're so glad you're a part of our community, and maybe found us just at the right time. Sometimes, you know, the universe works in some sort of circular way, believe that or not. That's a personal opinion and does not reflect the opinions of Oasis, but we're so happy that you're with us. Okay, so I'm going to do, thank you, Jocelyn. I'm going to do a quick recap of our announcements because it sounds like I had some technical difficulty with my audio. Is it better now? Does it seem better to everyone? Give me some nods. Okay, thank you so much. I was trying to pay attention to the live stream and MC at the same time, which I guess is a no-no. So we will not do that again. So I'll just briefly restate our announcements. First of all, we'd like to wish Taylor Gibson a happy birthday. Their birthday was on the 16th. And then a couple more serious announcements. You may have seen on Facebook in our, if you're friends with our friends and community members, David Krampus and Amy Varney, that Amy will be donating a kidney to David later this week. And Amy, when asked about, receiving cards in the mail, she said that she would rather save a tree and stick with technology, and that if people want to help honor her donation, that maybe perhaps they could donate blood with the knowledge that that's a life-saving gift for people. And she also would encourage people to message herself and David and share personal thoughts with them, but also funny animal memes and pictures are welcome. So let's keep David and Amy in our thoughts and wish them both a speedy recovery. On another sad note, we learned that Mark Dixon's father passed away yesterday. And again, this might be an opportunity for us to send encouraging messages via Facebook Messenger, and we'll let you know if there's any more that the community can do in that regard. So with that, we will go ahead and move into our breakout rooms. If you haven't been with us before, we take about a 10-minute coffee break where we put everyone into small groups so they can chat amongst themselves. And then we will be back in about 10 minutes. So we'll see you then. Thank you.
Hi, Julie. Can you hear me? Hi, Julie. Is it possible to get assigned to a breakout room?
If you could, yeah, there we go. Great. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back from our breakout rooms. Hopefully you enjoyed some nice conversation with some of your fellow community members, or maybe got to meet someone new. So we will give it just another beat, and then we will welcome back John Mueter, who will share with us another piece of beautiful music this morning. So John, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Hello again. I'm going to play for you a piano piece by Johannes Brahms, a German composer who lived most of his life in Vienna. He was himself a pianist and wrote a great deal of music for the keyboard. This is the intermezzo in A major. It's one of his best known pieces. So I hope you enjoy it.
we'll consider that a standing ovation because I am actually standing. I have a stand-up desk anyway, but that was just lovely, just so lovely. Thank you so much, and we can't wait to hear from you once more at the conclusion of our program. So thank you again, John.
Okay.
All right. So at this time, it's my pleasure to introduce our featured speaker. Athena Zeiter Hale, whose pronouns are she, her, and hers, received her Bachelor of Arts in History from Stetson University in 2016. As an undergraduate, she won a research grant proposal contest, which allowed her to travel to the FDR Presidential Library in Hyde Park, New York, and spend 3 weeks in the archives researching Eleanor Roosevelt's leadership as chair of the UN Commission on Human Rights and the drafting and adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Athena's finished capstone project won the History Manuscript of the Year Award at Stetson University and was presented at the 2015 National Conference on Undergraduate Research in Spokane, Washington. Since college, Athena has worked as a political organizer in Philadelphia during the 2016 general election, served for a year in AmeriCorps, working with multicultural students at her alma mater, coordinated the 2019 New Jersey Trans Youth Forum, and most recently works as the Visitor Services and Community Outreach Representative and the Edward M. Kennedy Institute for the United States Senate. Athena lives in Boston, Massachusetts, where she plans to continue her Eleanor Roosevelt and human rights work in grad school in the near future. Now, a bit about her presentation for today. Conventional wisdom on the history of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or UDHR, of 1948 argues that Eleanor Roosevelt's appointment as a delegate to the United Nations was mostly a symbolic gesture. That while she contributed greatly as an organizer and advocate for the UDHR, she contributed very little intellectually, and that the finished document was heavily influenced by Western powers with little input from the global South and developing countries. Athena will challenge all of these ideas by detailing Eleanor Roosevelt's decades-long background in the ideological development of human rights leading up to the 1948 UDHR, explaining how some of the most important contributions to the Declaration were non-Western, and explaining how the emphasis on universality, international cooperation, and compromise created a document with truly secular principles. So let's give a warm Oasis wave welcome to Athena.
Thank you, Julie, for that introduction. And thank you, Jocelyn, for sharing about chronic illness. I have chronic illness myself, and it's always wonderful to hear, ways that we can all support each other. And thank you, John, for sharing your wonderful music with us today. So, as Julie stated, I'm going to be talking about primarily about Eleanor Roosevelt and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I'm going to go over. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm going to go over how Eleanor Roosevelt came to be a delegate at the United Nations. Then I'm going to backtrack and go through some of the history that made her such an authority on human rights. And I'm finally going to discuss how the international cooperation spirit of the document made a secular document that we can uphold for humanistic principles today. So first, I'm going to start with the death of Franklin Delano Roosevelt on April 12th, 1945. Now, when news came across that FDR had died, Eleanor Roosevelt was at a luncheon in Washington, D.C. For a Women's Democratic Party function. And they pulled her out of this luncheon and told her that the president had passed. He was in Warm Springs, Georgia, which it was where his polio facilitation, polio treatment center was that he founded. Um, and so the first thing she did was go back to the White House, call Harry Truman, who had been the vice president for less than 3 months when FDR was reelected for an unprecedented fourth term. He had a new vice president chosen at the convention, Harry Truman. She invites Truman to the White House, answers the door of the White House herself, and he says, "Mrs. Roosevelt, I'm so sorry to hear about your loss," after she tells him Harry, the president, is dead. He says, "What can I do for you?" She replies, "No, Mr. President, what can I do for you? You're the one who's in trouble now." And so after she stays for the swearing in of Harry Truman, and then she takes off on a train down to Hyde Park to collect FDR's body and return him to Washington for a state funeral, and then onto Hyde Park, New York for a private funeral. So all of that takes about 2 weeks till she's, after moving out of the White House, having both funerals, clearing all her personal belongings out of the FDR estate in Hyde Park, New York, where I went to do my research, and moving into Valkill Cottage, which was 2 miles away, and where she planned to retire after the White House. And then really she wanted to leave Hyde Park and go stay in her townhouse in New York City. Well, the day that she's arriving in New York City for her townhouse for a while, which was in Greenwich Village, a reporter stops her in the street and says, "Mrs. Roosevelt, you've been as important as the president these last 12 years. What's next for you?" And she says, "There's nothing next. The story is over. There's nothing more to tell." And that turned out not to be the case. She became very interested watching from afar the July 1945 Planning Committee for the United Nations, which took place in San Francisco. She didn't attend because she was still in the mourning period, and she didn't want the press to pay too much attention to her and take focus away from the United Nations. But she had an inside look to the United Nations because her dear friend, Mary McLeod Bethune, was the only African American woman who was an American representative to that first planning committee to the United Nations. And Eleanor Roosevelt began to again use her My Day column, which she had started 11 years prior in the 1930s. She started a daily column of approximately 500 words per column, and she would write it 6 days a week. And she took about 2 weeks after FDR's death, but then began writing again, telling her views about America, what she was up to, who she was meeting. And so when she was watching the planning committee of the United Nations in 1945, she was writing in her My Day column about it. And she was also writing to Harry Truman quite frequently. There are entire volumes of letters between Eleanor Roosevelt and Harry Truman. hundreds and hundreds of letters. And because she would write to him, telling him who's who in Washington, giving her advice, telling him very bluntly when she disagreed with him. And she was also taking her disagreements to the press. Now, Truman was of two minds. On the one hand, she was one of the only people who advised him in his early time in the White House that didn't advise him with judgment. He had only had executive experience for 3 months. Before that, he was a senator from Missouri, and he had never had another executive position. And the people who were part of the federal government, who he saw every day, were kind of condescending to him because they were used to FDR, who had so much experience, and he had very little, and he kind of came into the White House blind. So he loved having an advisor in Eleanor Roosevelt who allowed him, who gave him information and advice without being judgmental about it. On the other hand, when she disagreed with him in the press, in her My Day column, at speaking events around the country, it was kind of undermining his whole legislative agenda. I mean, imagine if Michelle Obama had a daily blog in these times and how it might pull focus from the president. You know, for good in these times, in my opinion. But so Harry Truman was kind of like, what am I gonna do with her? I need her on my side. How can I make her part of my administration so she's a member of the team? I love her advice, but when she doesn't agree with us, she's really making me look bad. So he talks around to his cabinet members saying, where can we put Mrs. Roosevelt? And the Secretary of State, Jim Byrne, who was not as sympathetic to Eleanor Roosevelt as Harry Truman was, thought, told him, Mr. President, I have the perfect idea. Let's make her a delegate to the first General Assembly session of the United Nations. Let's get her out of the country. So she's focused on foreign policy and she's not speaking all around the country, making us look bad. So Harry Truman approaches Eleanor Roosevelt with this offer. And at first she says, oh no, it would be impossible. I don't have the experience. I don't know what I would do. Surely there are more qualified people. And then she hung up the phone, thought about it for about 5 minutes, called him back and said, I'll take it. And so on December 31st, 1945, she boarded a ship in New York Harbor, headed for London, and the first session of the UN General Assembly, which would take place the following week. Now, aboard the ship, she's with Senator Arthur Vandenberg, who is the head of the American delegation, and his kind of sidekick, John Foster Dulles, who was an alternate delegate, not even a full delegate, an alternate delegate who would go on to become President Eisenhower's Secretary of State. So they think, well, what are we going to do with her? Let's put her in Committee 3, which covered social, humanitarian, and cultural issues, and which they didn't expect would be a focus of the first session. They expected the first session to be all about organizing the Security Council, talking about how we're going to finance the United Nations, those kinds of things. In the meantime, the press has released the information that she was appointed as a delegate to the United Nations. And op-eds were coming up all over the country in different newspapers with kind of a mixed reception to this idea. Like let's look at two op-eds in Los Angeles. One by Thomas Stokes of the Los Angeles Daily News, who wrote, "She, perhaps better than any other person, can represent the little people of this country and indeed of the world. She has been their champion. She has spoken for them when it took courage. She has their confidence." Thomas Stokes was a Black man and referring to her civil rights advocacy. On the other hand, in the Los Angeles Times on the same day was another op-ed who said, whatever Mrs. Roosevelt's virtues, being tactful is not among them. And she seems misplaced in a position which requires diplomacy. Good judgment and good taste appear alike alien to her makeup. There are plenty of well-educated, well-qualified American women who could be named to such a post, but Mrs. Roosevelt is not among them. So you had those very different types of op-eds popping up all over the country. So they get to London and the first session starts. And delegates of the other countries, specifically throughout Europe, specifically throughout Southeast Asia, don't want to talk about the Security Council. They don't want to talk about finance. They want to talk about the more than 40 million displaced people in
Hi, Athena, can you hear me? I think we've lost your audio. Hi, Athena.
All right, am I back?
Yep, you're back. Thank
Okay.
you. Sorry about that.
What's the last
So
thing
just
you heard?
the last thing we heard is that there were 40 million displaced persons that they
Okay.
were wanting to speak about.
So none of the male delegates in the American delegation were prepared to speak on that subject. And so they thought, so John Foster Dulles and Arthur Vandenberg thought, well, let's let Mrs. Roosevelt make a fool of herself and we'll let her be our speaker so she won't be back to the United Nations. And Andrei Vyshinsky, who was the delegate from the Soviet Union, had given a speech on the subject of refugees, talking about the collective of states more important than international cooperation, really against the idea that countries had an obligation to be open to refugees. And after they asked her to give a rebuttal, she talks to her aides for about 4 minutes and gets up to the podium without any notes and gives an unscripted speech that blew them away. It was so good that she got the first ever standing ovation at the United Nations. She was featured on the front page of Pravda the next day. Pravda was the newspaper, the main state newspaper of the Soviet Union, who were covering her speech instead of Andrei Vyshinsky's. That's how powerful it was. She noticed that she had a slow start to her speech. Some of the Latin American delegation was getting up to leave. And she started talking. She switched to Spanish because she knew 5 languages and started speaking about Peruvian and El Salvadorian independence, and relating that back to the refugee issue and stop them in their tracks. And so after that speech, John Foster Dulles approaches Eleanor Roosevelt and said, "I may have been wrong about you. You did just fine." And the General Assembly of the United Nations unanimously elects Eleanor Roosevelt to chair the Commission on Human Rights. And so the main purpose of the Commission on Human Rights was to talk about human rights, because it was in the Charter of the United Nations that had been adopted the previous July in San Francisco. It says that one of the purposes of the United Nations is to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights and dignity and worth of the human person, and commits all member states to promote universal respect for and observance of human rights and fundamental freedoms for all, without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion. So Eleanor Roosevelt saw the first objective of the commission is to explain what are human rights. And she decides that they need to draft a document defining human rights and get that document agreed upon by people all around the world of different faiths, different nationalities, different races, and agree on a common set of principles on human rights. So, and then the first session adjourns, and right after the adjournment, so she sets up this commission. Right after the adjournment, she takes a trip across war-torn Europe, and she visits refugee camps, she visits concentration camps, and she writes in her My Day column, "When will our consciences grow so tender that we will act to prevent human misery rather than avenge it?" And so that's the main fuel that that fuels her when they reconvene a few months later. Now, when they reconvene, delegates from all around the world send in members to form this nuclear drafting committee for an international document on human rights. Now, the drafting committee is full of lawyers, full of philosophers, full of highly educated people. And Eleanor Roosevelt has only had 4 years total. And I don't mean 4 years of college, 4 years total of formal education when she was a teenager at a boarding school in London. So her experience is underestimated. But she was very curious about everything and took it upon herself to learn throughout her adult life, especially when she was First Lady. And she, in preparation, in the weeks leading up to her disembarking on this journey at the United Nations, she was reading up on religions around the world so she could find a common ground with delegates from around the world. Now, to understand why she actually had a great background in human rights, you have to go almost 25 years earlier. And in the aftermath of FDR finding out he had polio in the summer of 1921. So FDR was a wildly popular in the election of 1920. He was the vice presidential candidate for candidate James Cox. And so he became, even though Cox and Roosevelt lost the election to Harding and Coolidge, FDR came out of that election unscathed politically, and the whole nation very interested to see what his next steps were. But the very next summer, he contracted polio when he was vacationing at Campobello Island off the coast of Maine in New Brunswick, where his family summer retreat was. And FDR fell into a deep depression because he thought his political career was over. But, and his mother agreed. Sarah Delano Roosevelt wanted him to stay home and stop politics and just be a country farmer, getting all the health care that he needed to deal with his polio. But Louis Howe, who was his campaign manager and personal friend, and Eleanor Roosevelt had a different plan. They said that FDR is going to spend most of the 1920s finding out how to take care of himself with polio, while Eleanor Roosevelt became involved in New York politics and kept the Roosevelt name alive in the state and the nation, while FDR was recovering and trying to find out how he's going to manage his polio if he hopes to continue a political career. So she becomes involved with the Democratic Women's Club of New York. She becomes involved with the National Democratic Women's Club, basically from the years 1923 to 1927. You didn't see the name Franklin D. Roosevelt in papers without Mrs. in front of it. So she writes, so it's June 25th, 1924, and on the front page of the New York Times is an article written by the National Women's Democratic Platform. And in that article written by Mrs. Franklin D. Roosevelt, it says several things.
I think we've lost you, Athena. I think your screen is frozen. I don't know if you can hear me.
Healthcare, and we believe the physical health of the people of the nation is an essential safeguard to democracy. We are against lynching, and we want equal justice under the law and an end of trial by mob. And so all of these things was in this Democratic Women's Platform in 1924 that ended up in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. So also, so flash forward, she's first lady now. It's 1933. She starts the Arthur Dale Homestead Project in the northwest corner of West Virginia, which provides basic housing rights to one of the poorest areas and hit hardest by the Great Depression as part of a New Deal.
I think we've lost your audio, Athena. Can you hear me?
She writes an article in her My Day column that not only advocates for Jewish refugees, but relates the plight of African Americans in the American South to the plight of Jews in Nazi Germany. And she writes, "Are you free if you cannot vote, if you cannot be sure that the same justice will be meted out to you as to your neighbor, if you are expected to live on a lower level than your neighbor and to work for lower wages, if you are barred from certain places and from certain opportunities?" There are lots of things which make me wonder whether we ever look ourselves straight in the face and really mean what we say when we are busy patting ourselves on the back. And so then in 1944, she gets a letter from a white woman who criticizes her wanting to desegregate the United States and says that integration will relate integration will result in forced socialization between whites and blacks. So this is a racist white woman who's writing to the First Lady, criticizing her, 1944. And she replies in this letter, "Nobody can tell me who I have in my house any more than I can tell others. The only things I have advocated for are 4 basic rights.
I think we may have lost you. Can Athena, do you have can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry. Looks like we lost your video. Did you get a request? There you go. Sorry about that. Zoom is struggling today, apparently. So sorry.
Sorry about that.
So the last was about, she was saying that no one could tell her who to invite into her home. And then the 4. Okay.
So 4 basic rights: the right to equal education, the right to equal pay for equal work, the right to equal justice under law for everyone, and the right to participating in the making of the laws by the use of the ballot. So back to now, we're in 1948. It's been 2 years of drafting what is now known as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In the fall of 1948, the delegates of the United Nations are meeting in Paris. And between September and December. And in this time, so they have several drafts of a Universal Declaration of Human Rights drafted by René Cassin of France, by Dr. Charles Malik of Lebanon, by John Peters Humphrey of Canada, by the vice chair of the drafting committee, who is Dr. P.C. Chang of China, a philosopher in the Confucian field of philosophy. And she's trying to get all these lawyers and philosophers' language, long language, into the language that common people of the world will understand. So she condenses 170 amendments into 30 articles for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And how she does this is in 60 days,
Athena, we've lost your audio again. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry, we still can't hear you. I'm so sorry.
Am I back?
Yep. Okay. So
Okay.
you said in 60 days.
So she holds 85 meetings in 60 days, sometimes 2 or 3 meetings a day. And on top of this, she has 100 one-on-one meetings, over 100. She meets not just with every delegation at the United Nations, not just with every delegate in every delegation, but with every staff member of every delegate in every delegation in the General Assembly of the United Nations. She wants to make sure that transcribers are transcribing the minutes of the meetings correctly. She wants to make sure that secretarial notes are up to par. And there are a few last things that I just want to touch on. Handsome Mehta is a Indian delegate, a woman who is the only other the
Oh dear, it looks like you're frozen again. I'm so sorry.
equal in dignity and rights. Am I on?
Yeah, I'm sorry. We lost that about the Indian delegate.
Okay. So the first article, when they go into the fall session of 1948, says all men are created equal. Sounds very like the Declaration of Independence. And Hansa Mehta, who is a female delegate from India, says, if this document says all men, when we of the developing world, when we women go back to our countries, it will mean all men. And so they come up, they negotiate the language. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act toward one another in a spirit of brotherhood. And so it becomes all human beings. And as a trans woman in the 21st century, I know that my rights weren't thought about at that time. My non-binary peers' rights weren't thought about at that time, but I'm very glad that they went with all human beings instead of all men and women. And secondly, I want to talk about another aspect of that first article, the word endowed. Now, you had the another female delegate who was one of the temporary delegates, this time from Pakistan. Her name was Bekram Shaista Ikramullah. And she said that she can't vote for this declaration because it doesn't mention God. It doesn't have the word God. And am I still on? Okay. And so she says that I don't think I can vote for this. I have to vote against it. And Eleanor Roosevelt sits down with her and says, you know, I too am a woman of faith, a different faith. Ikramullah was Muslim, Eleanor Roosevelt was Christian. But she says that in my faith, we believe that God is still in the room, even though he's not mentioned. So that's one way that that she talked about that word endowed. The other was the word endowed from the perspective of the delegation from the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was uh, an atheist communist society, socialist communist society. Now, the delegate from the Soviet Union was Alexei Pavlov at that time. He was the nephew of the scientist Ivan Pavlov, who did the behavioral studies that you might have heard of with dogs and that sort of thing. And he said that they would have to vote against the declaration because it contained the word endowed. And with him, she sits down and she says, but can't someone be endowed by nature? Can't they be endowed by human evolution? Can't they be endowed by science? Endowed does not necessarily mean the existence of a deity. And so that's how she was able to take an idea, an interfaith idea, and phrase it in a very secular way and include that in the document. So now we have a document that applies to everyone in the.
Oh. Okay, I've lost your audio again, Athena. I don't know if you can hear me. Oh, now you're back. Yes.
Okay. So now as a result, we have a document that applies to everyone in the world and is all secular language. Even though it upholds freedom of religion, it doesn't include the words God, and it doesn't exclude people of no faith. And so really bringing these international cooperation together benefited this document in this way.
Okay, I'm so sorry we've had so much technical trouble, Athena. I really, and I don't know that you can, if you can see in the comments, but everybody, this has just been such a fascinating topic for everybody, and I know we could have you speak for another half hour, but I'm afraid that we're short on time. You have just dealt with these technical issues so fantastically, and we're so appreciative. And we have tons of questions, but we have no time. But there's one that I would like to get in really quickly from the comments. How did you first learn about or get interested in Eleanor Roosevelt? How has that become your focus of your research, or what she did?
I started college at a community college in Reno, Nevada. I come from a very socioeconomically poor background, and I wasn't able to start college right out of high school. It wasn't until I was 24 that I could start college. And so I started at a community college 9 years ago in 2011, and I took a U.S. history from 1865 to present course. And one of the am I still on?
Yep, you're still on.
Okay,
you're fine.
One of the assignments from my very creative professor, you had a series of assignments that you could pick from to do. She gave like a list of assignments, pick one or two.
Oh no. Oh, I'm so sorry. This has been a struggle this morning. I think we've lost your audio again.
Am I still on?
Yep, now.
Okay.
There you go.
So the assignment was to read an autobiography and come give a presentation in that character.
Okay.
And this was before I came out as trans.
Uh-huh.
And I kind of used it as an excuse to perform my gender. I used
Nice.
it as an excuse to, like, every Halloween I would use, and this was another non-October, opportunity to come to school dressed as a woman. And it allowed me to do that. But I read her autobiography,
Mm-hmm.
and I was so amazed by how much I didn't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I never heard about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights before. It's one of the most important documents in human history. Never heard about it,
Yeah.
not covered in American schools.
Nope.
And so I had this fascination. And then I became the valedictorian of my community college when I got my associates. And when I transferred to Stetson University, which is a small liberal arts private university in an affordable part of the country, it's in Central Florida, I was able to continue this work there.
Fantastic. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you again so much. And I'm so sorry that we're having to cut our question and answer short. And I wonder if you would be willing to, we're going to have John play us out, but I'm wondering if you'd be willing to stick around a little bit after our live stream ends just to answer some community members' questions. Don't feel obligated if you have other, things going on today, but I know we have people that would love to speak with you and to thank you in person.
Can I throw in like 2 short little quotes before?
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay. These quotes are from one of the greatest books of Eleanor Roosevelt quotes. She wrote a kind of a self-help book in 1961 called You Learn by Living, 11 Keys for a More Fulfilling Life. The first one is you gain strength, courage, and confidence by every experience in which you really stop to look fear in the face. You are able to say to yourself, I lived through this horror. I can take the next thing that comes along. The danger lies in refusing to face the fear, in not daring to come to grips with it. If you fail anywhere along the line, it will take away your confidence. You must make yourself succeed every time. You must do the thing you think you cannot do.
Well, that's really timely, isn't it? We're facing all sorts of fear right now, aren't we?
And the last one is, surely in light of history, it is more intelligent to hope rather than to fear, to try rather than not to try. For one thing we know beyond all doubt, nothing has ever been achieved by the person who says it can't be done.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for spending this time with us this morning. I think it really opened our eyes to a lot of things, like you said, that aren't taught in history. And hopefully we can schedule a time to have you back. Everybody give an Oasis what we have for applause, since we can't hear everyone. And thank you so much, Athena.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let us know what else you want to talk about. It was fascinating, and your presentation, just kept us all very much engaged. So we appreciate it so much. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. All right, John. We're going to go ahead and have you play us out. I'm going to put the link. We know that KC Oasis is a 501c3 supported by voluntary donations. None of our staff is paid. So I'm going to put those links in the chat. And with that, we will have John, if you could please grace us with your final presentation or your final performance for today.
Okay, thank you, Julie. I have one last piece, and I'm going to play a piece by every pianist's favorite composer, namely Chopin, who was born of a Polish father and French mother in Poland. And when he was a young man, he moved to Paris and spent the rest of his life there. This is one of his concert waltzes, the waltz in C sharp minor.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, John. Thank you so much. And once again, I will probably start nagging you to come play for us again, knowing me. That was fantastic. And yeah, I'm sure we would all we'll all look forward to the next time we can hear you, and hopefully we can do that in person sometime in the future when it's safe. So thank you so much for volunteering to play for us out of the kindness of your heart. And I know the community really appreciates it. So thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. I'm going to share real briefly there. I'm going to share my screen really briefly. So as you might have seen on the Facebook private page, Jason Radford has put together this fundraiser. It's turned into a fundraiser for Oasis. He's ordered these signs and is graciously offered to donate the $2 from each sign to Oasis, plus someone, he said, tossed in an extra $5. So he's raised $85 for Oasis through this. He still has 3 signs remaining. So if these are your values and you would like one of these yard signs, he still has 3. And so you could reach out to him via Messenger and then make some arrangements. They are for only local meet up to pick up, of course, wearing masks, practicing safe social distancing while you're picking up these signs. So please, if you haven't had the opportunity, reach out to Jason for that. And so with that, I'd like to thank all of our presenters, John Mueter, Jocelyn Rose, Athena, Zeiter, Hale, and thank all of you for spending your time with us. We also have some opportunities throughout the week. We have a coffee talk every morning at 7:30 a.m. and then again Wednesday evenings at 8 p.m. It's the same meeting link, same meeting number that we use for our Sunday gathering. So if you're able to join, we'd love to see you there. And with that, I am Julie Samuel Wisman. I appreciate you joining us, and stay well, stay safe, and we will see you here again next week. Thank you so much.